Number 10. Nightcrawler. Nightcrawler does not get enough love on our channel. I know at times I can be the one ragging on him, but at the end of the day I really do love Kurt Wagner. I think he is a fascinating character and one of the most complex individuals that we actually have on the X-Men team. Even though his teleportation powers are not as impressive as some other mutant teleporters that we have, such as Magic or Manifold, Nightcrawler is still a character whose determination and faith tend to be his driving force, helping him to do the unimaginable at times. And there is no length to which he wouldn't go to help out his teammates, his friends, and his family, the X-Men. In fact, at one point, Nightcrawler even left heaven after his death and returned to life just to help them out. That's pretty wild. Can't stop that. And friends, before I move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, why not let us know that you love us by clicking that subscribe button? Do it! And if you already did it, thank you. You're great. Number 9. Moira McTaggart. You wouldn't have likely thought of Moira McTaggart as an unstoppable mutant. Probably though because you wouldn't have even thought of her as being a mutant. But here we are, and here she is. She is a mutant. During the Krakoan era of the X-Men comics, it was revealed to us right near the beginning, during the Dawn of X period, that Moira this entire time was actually a mutant. What? And what's even more insane is she might have one of the most interesting and powerful abilities out there. Her power allows her to resurrect after her death, but not by coming back to life, but simply by living her life all over again, thereby resetting the continuity, manipulating the very fabric of reality and how we perceive it. Moira has lived multiple lives, always remembering the ones that came before. This gave her knowledge which allowed her to manipulate the course of history. Number 8. Wolverine. One of the most skilled and effective trackers we have over at Marvel Comics, and I would say probably one of my most favorite characters. If you try to run from him, there is likely nowhere safe for you to hide, at least not on planet Earth, and even possibly not in the cosmos either. Has Wolverine ever gone to track someone across the stars? Because that is a story I would love to read. Oh wait, there was something similar to that in the X-Men Infinity comic, where Wolverine was tracking lost mutants through space. Those are the little online ones that you can get on Marvel Unlimited that you scroll through, by the way. They're kind of like webtoons. Wolverine is not a man who often gives up, even when he wants to, and based on how tragic his life has been, there have been many moments where Wolverine has wanted to call it quits, but even then he keeps on going. Not even his own will to give up can stop him from soldiering on. Number 7. Mr. Sinister. Mr. Sinister isn't just one man, he can literally be an army of clones. What is more unstoppable than that? Well, not much. Especially when you consider just how brilliant and deadly he and each of his clones can be, with their immense knowledge of mutant DNA and twisted approach to evolution. Mr. Sinister isn't just one of my favorite mutants because of his fabulous look, although that definitely only makes me love him more, to be honest. It's because he's always up to something, always scheming and planning and hiding in the shadows. And when Sinister schemes, it can be dangerous, like to the point that he can take over the whole world by manipulating and tailoring the timeline to his liking. That kind of dangerous. See Sins of Sinister for more on what I'm talking about there. Number 6. Exodus. We don't talk about Exodus enough. As you know, I'm a big fan of psionic powers outside of, I would say, super speed and teleportation. I think this might actually be like my favorite power set, and definitely is one of the power sets I consider to be the most powerful. Why do I love it so? Why do I consider it to be so powerful? Because it allows you to defeat someone without ever having to really lift a finger. In the physical world anyways. Exodus might not be as well known as some of the others on this list, but trust me when I say he is one of the most powerful telepaths and telekinetics out there. We have seen him prove himself in psionic battles against ancient eternal creatures that were in essence kind of like dragons. In fact, I believe he even literally fought a dragon as well at one point. Exodus not only has his mutant powers, which were at an insane level already when they first manifested, but he also had them enhanced by Apocalypse, making him even more powerful. In fact, he is considered to be one of the most powerful mutants in existence. If that doesn't make him unstoppable, I do not know what would. Number 5. Cassandra Nova. I mean, Cassandra Nova is seriously just crazy. I love her, and I also kind of love to hate her. I mean, that's the beauty of Cassandra Nova. Technically, she is not quite a mutant. Instead, she is a Mumadrai, which is basically like an evil twin that you have to defeat to be born, at least according to the Shi'ar. In Cassandra's case, she is the evil twin of Charles Xavier, whose powers first manifested in the womb before he was born, so that he might stop Cassandra, who attacked him at that time. As a result, Cassandra was defeated and Charles lived on, being born into the world. However, even then, this wouldn't be the end for Cassandra. She actually survived as basically a collection of cells that look like goo, and she managed to once again manifest, returning even stronger than she was before. And yeah, like I said, she's a Mummudrai, but she's also like a Mummudrai of Charles, so that kind of makes her a mutant. And right now, or at least recently, last time I was reading Marauders, she was fighting for the mutants because she kind of allied herself. She kind of saw herself as one. So I mean, yeah, it kind of depends on the story, but I think we can consider her a mutant. Number 4. Jean Grey. Jean Grey was once the Phoenix Force, but even without the Phoenix Force, she is a powerhouse. In fact, at one point Jean even stated the Phoenix Force was, get this, actually holding her back. What? Even without her connection to the Phoenix, even when she is not a host, Jean has proven herself as one of the most unstoppable mutants out there. She has gone toe to toe with gods and not only survived, but also won. Jean Grey is also one of the most unstoppable in the sense that she doesn't even really need to mess you up to win a fight with you. And I think that is a really impressive strength. Or rather, I guess I should say, she really only needs to mess you up mentally maybe, but then, even then, not in a way that leaves you like catatonic or anything like that. She isn't Xavier. She won't necessarily just like wipe your mind or anything like that. She doesn't need to. Instead, she'll give you an entirely new perspective that will make you change your own mind. Number 3. Magneto. While Magneto was stopped a while ago with him seemingly being killed during the long and epic fight that he had against Uranos, Magneto still wasn't even really stopped there. Now, allow me to explain. I know that's a contradiction. Minus everything that may or may not be going with him potentially returning from the dead in Scarlet Witch's comic, unless that's Joseph, his younger clone, and it could be. I'm not up to date on Scarlet Witch, so if there's some things that have come up in the last couple issues, don't spoil it for me in the comments. Magneto actually never died in his first battle with Uranos, despite literally having his heart removed. Magneto willed his blood to keep like pumping through his body, using the iron in his blood to help control and move it through him, with his mutant powers going into overdrive to act as a temporary replacement for his heart during the AXE or the Axe event when he was essentially trapped on planet Arakko, aka Mars, as he also fought to defend it. And even during his rematch with Uranos, he really only went out because he chose to go. Sounds pretty unstoppable to me, I'm just saying. Number 2. Storm. Storm is one of the best, more badass characters that we have around. She is unstoppable on, honestly, a lot of different fronts. Not just because of her mutant powers to control the weather and manipulate the atmosphere around her, sometimes even the world over. Not just because of her insane fighting skills and physical prowess, and not even just because Storm is a goddess. And honestly, not even just because Storm is also an amazing leader, she's also that too. A lot of the time for me, it's Storm's spirit and her determination that just makes her the most unstoppable. She does not give up, even when it seems like defeat is basically inevitable. Storm makes her own path and does not let others define her, and that is both what I admire the most about her and what I think makes her often such a force to be reckoned with. Willful, strong, and undefeatable. Storm knows who she is and she isn't afraid to show it, and I love that about her. That's being unstoppable right there. Knowing who you are and being like, this is who I am, that's it. Take it or leave it. But you gotta take it because I'm unstoppable. Number 1. Apocalypse. Apocalypse is definitely one of the most unstoppable mutants around. He is one of, if not the most deadly mutant that we have, I would say. There's a whole alternate reality where Apocalypse has successfully conquered the world, and there have been a few times where he's also come close to doing that in the main continuity. That's why I personally was both so amazed and so surprised, kinda scared, when I saw Apocalypse join the mutant nation of Krakoa. Initially my thoughts were, when is he gonna betray them, because that's gonna happen. But over time I came to understand that Apocalypse being so unstoppable didn't always have to be a bad thing, as he is also allied literally with all the mutants. He could actually be a force for good in that way, because if there's anything that Apocalypse does believe in, he believes in mutants, and so it kind of worked really perfectly that he'd work with them. Ultimately though, Apocalypse wants mutants to be at their best and to be on top. So as soon as there is a disparity between what he wants for mutant kind and what the people and other leaders of Krakoa want, he's probably gonna go back to being unstoppable in a more villainous way. Number 10. Moira McTaggart. Moira McTaggart, when she was a mutant, was pretty unstoppable. I mean, she almost single-handedly destroyed all mutants from behind the scenes, which I think is pretty wild. And she also posed as someone working to save all mutant kind on various occasions, which I think also made her unstoppable in a different kind of way. Moira McTaggart, of course, is no longer a mutant in the comics as she was depowered, but her mutation was reincarnation, with the knowledge of prior lives lived, carry that forward into her next life. In fact, Moira's power was so great that it was proven to be connected to the very fabric of time and reality, with the whole universe seemingly resetting after each of her deaths. This also means that even after being depowered, Sinister was able to create and use clones of Moira with their mutant gene activated to predict the outcome of various events and shape reality in his own image. In essence, Sinister can now use Moira, or more specifically Moira clones, to attempt various tactics in order to get things as he would like them. Now, when a tactic fails, he simply destroys that Moira clone, thereby erasing that tactic, its outcome, and the resulting timeline/reality. And friends, before I move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, and if you love it when I talk about mutants, I know I love it, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 9. Franklin Richards. Franklin Richards might not have his powers currently in the comics, but that doesn't stop him from being one of the most powerful mutants to have ever existed, and definitely the most unstoppable, at least across time. Besides, I'm pretty sure Franklin will have his powers and his mutant status back eventually. Like Gwenpool, Franklin was also revealed to have willed himself into becoming a mutant, although he did so subconsciously, which is even more nuts. Franklin's powers were of the reality warping variant, and apparently without knowing it, he used them to make himself appear as a mutant. However, as his powers waned, it was made clear that he was not truly one, but simply appearing as one thanks to these powers. And apparently this was confirmed when we noticed that, yeah, Franklin, oh wait, no, you're not actually a mutant, you're just a depowered mutate, so whoops. This is why he ended up getting rejected from Krakoa, although Professor X did not appear to Franklin personally, but simply in his astral form. Number 8. Darwin. Darwin is one of the mutants who was brought on the mission to infiltrate the Children of the Vault's home base, known of course simply as the Vault. Darwin was handpicked for this mission due to his unique mutation, which allows him to adapt to any situation, evolving himself to best survive whatever he comes up against. For this reason, he's pretty unstoppable. This is also why the Children of the Vault valued him and ended up capturing him, because his mutation was also valued amongst them and makes them a lot more unstoppable as they can implement it into their own evolution to help them evolve smarter and faster, making them even more formidable foes for the X-Men. Number 7. Sunspot. Sunspot is a mutant that I feel I do not talk about enough on this channel, so I'm using this list to grow his ego just a little bit more. Sunspot is unstoppable in many ways. He's not only powerful as a mutant, even willing to give his life to save the day, refusing to be stopped by whatever problem comes his way, but he's also insanely ruthless when it comes to the world of business. He is wealthy and so often can break through barriers that some mutants might be limited by due to their income bracket. Besides that, Roberto is probably also one of the most stubborn characters, not even just mutants, that we have in comics, and for that reason he is also personally pretty unstoppable, as he doesn't usually give up or throw in the towel easily. And if you want to talk about power levels, woo! Sunspot has been referred to before as one of the most powerful mutants ever. Now granted, I think he was the one who called himself that, but Bobby's ego aside, I do actually myself believe him to be one of the most powerful. Number 6. Destiny. I love this suggestion from Jamie Dowdy, who commented on our last video saying, "I think Destiny will be the ultimate stop to Sinister. She's got something planned, as always." And I imagine a smirk at the end of this comment. As always, smirk. Because, well, you are so right, Jamie. Destiny does always have something up her sleeve. This is just because she is so good at seeing the future. There is very little Destiny seemingly can't see when it comes to all the multiple possibilities of the world, and I do agree that Destiny will likely play a key role in the demise later on of Sinister. Straight out of the gate, she threw many wrenches into his various attempts to enact his plan. If it weren't for Destiny, Sinister would have succeeded potentially a lot more easily and sooner. Also, people never think of mutants with precognitive abilities as being unstoppable because, well, they're usually pretty squishy, but you don't have to worry as much about being squishy when 1. Your wife is one of the most deadly mutants, Mystique, and 2. You can pretty much just like sidestep almost any and all dangers headed your way by seeing their potential before they have even arrived. Number 5. Emma Frost. Emma Frost is one of the best telepathic minds we have in the comics. She has proven herself to be even more powerful than some of the most iconic telepathic mutants, such as Professor Xavier Xavier himself, at one point laying traps in Cyclops' mind with which to ensnare Xavier should he attempt to enter Scott's mind, which of course he did. Emma also has proven how deadly she is when she manipulated the mutants into going to war during the Inhumans vs. X-Men event. Not her finest moment, to be sure, as a hero. Speaking of her being a villain, she also successfully stole Storm's body for a time in a body swap, managing to briefly infiltrate the X-Men, and even when Emma isn't using her own powers and mastering them, she's proving how powerful she is while using someone else's. Like when she swapped bodies with Iceman and was able to use his powers to turn into water and travel through currents. So not only is Emma a powerful telepath, teacher, and businesswoman in her own right, but she can also be quite good at mastering mutant skills and power sets which don't even belong to her, which is probably what also makes her a really good teacher. Number 4. Mad Jim Jaspers. He is a weird mutant that actually started out as a villain who was anti-mutant himself. Mad Jim Jaspers was in essence someone who was seen as pro-human and anti-mutant until people realized he himself was a mutant with reality warping powers. He ended up being quite the foe as well, and despite having died multiple times, has returned time and time again. Most recently he returned in Otherworld, first spotted there during the Otherworld tournament showcased in the Ten of Swords event. Jim literally just popped up there as the person in charge of the crooked market in Otherworld, the sort of black market in the fantasy world where a person can literally find and acquire anything they could possibly think of, no matter how rare, elusive, or seemingly forbidden. The even stranger thing is, last we saw him before this, I believe Jaspers was once again dead, and his random appearance was not explained here. So we still don't really know how he came back to life and got to Otherworld. I suppose we can chalk that up to just how unstoppable Mad Jim and his power set are. Number 3. Synch. Synch has recently become one of the most OP mutants to many X-Men fans. He was resurrected on Krakoa earlier as he was needed for a mission to infiltrate the Vault, where the children of the Vault had retreated to. The team was 3 mutants who are known for their unstoppable level of resilience, especially combined. It included Laura Kinney, formerly known as X-23, currently known as Wolverine, Darwin, and Synch. Of the 3, only Synch seemingly survived and escaped once they had the intel that they needed. Although later we learned that Laura also managed to survive, so now we kind of have 2 Lauras in the comics, old Laura and younger Laura, as she was initially believed dead and therefore resurrected. Synch was able to get valuable information back to Krakoa before dying himself and being resurrected once more in a younger body. You see, in the Vault, time moves differently, so he and the team had actually lived there for hundreds of years, despite the fact that a much shorter period of time had passed outside of the Vault on Earth. Upon being resurrected, Synch's powers seemed to mutate further, allowing him to retain the powers of a mutant that he'd synced with previously, as opposed to only being able to use their powers while nearby and synced with them. Although using this power to its fullest extent does seem to be hard on Synch's body, so there is that. Number 2. Iceman. I think Iceman has proven time and time again that he can't be stopped. The story I recanted earlier where Emma was able to use Bobby's power while in his body to travel through water as water, that is also something Bobby himself can now do, as was evident when he fought recently against Fin Fang Foom in the first run of the Marauder series. His fellow mutants and teammates had thought that Bobby had been destroyed when in reality he hadn't. It looked like Fin Fang Foom obliterated him, but Bobby, being Bobby, he just turned to water, went into the ocean, and came back up again, proving that he is a force to be reckoned with. Even hell can't stop Bobby. He'll just freeze it over again, as he's also done in the past before. And to be honest, it would probably be even easier for him this time around, as he's continued to grow in power since then. You know you're unstoppable when you are able to do things like freeze hell over. Number 1. Storm. Storm is not just a mutant with unbelievably unstoppable powers, she is also a literal goddess. What does that mean? Well, it means that Storm can be even more unstoppable just from the power of belief. At one point, Storm ends up literally being confirmed as a goddess after people believed for her to be one for years. We are shown that when people believe in Storm, this gives her even more power, which is wild because base level power Aurora Monroe is already off the charts. Storm is a fearless leader who does not even fear death himself, even going so far as to dance with a version of Death, Apocalypse's son, and one of his original 4 horsemen. And she beats Death in combat too, which is pretty wild. Of course, you know, this isn't Mistress Death, but it simply goes to show how fearless Storm is, whether we're talking literal death, metaphysical death, or an alternate representation of death. Number 10. Deadpool. Okay, so I know what you're gonna say. Deadpool's not technically a mutant, but hear me out. Deadpool is mutant adjacent in the sense that he is a mutate, and he has also long been affiliated with the mutants, even being a member of the X-Force team. So when it comes to Deadpool, I really feel like he's kind of earned his stripes. And you know, there's never going to be a list that's like non-mutants that should be X-Men, because that doesn't trend. We can't do that, so I gotta include Deadpool on this list. There was a time when he was actually actively trying to become an X-Men member, and they basically gave him temporary X-Men member status for a little bit, but he never really got to be a full member. The X-Men only even gave him temporary status because they wanted to keep an eye on him because they didn't trust him. I feel like Wade just really wants to find a place where he feels like he belongs and would actually be a pretty good asset to the X-Men team in a lot of ways. Sure, he can be annoying, and sure, sometimes he messes up missions. He's assigned. But at the end of the day, his heart is ultimately, I think, in the right place. Assuming he has a heart at the time and he isn't just, you know, like a disembodied head or something. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, and if you love it when I talk mutants, I know, I love it, be sure to let us know by giving this channel a subscribe if you're not subscribed already. And if you are, thank you. Number 9. Dupe. Wow, so I really thought that Dupe had actually been an X-Men before, but apparently he hasn't, hence why we're here. Dupe has long been affiliated with the X-Men, but has never actually been a member of the main team. Dupe has definitely been affiliated with X-Force, and later, as they become known, X-Statics, not Cable or Wolverine's X-Force to be clear here, but he's never actually been a member of the X-Men main team itself. I did notice that on his Marvel fandom page, it seems that he's been listed as being a former X-Men, and I tried to look into that. The citation for him being considered an X-Men recently was 10 of Swords Destruction issue number 1, but I've read that issue and I don't know what that is in reference to myself. I even went back to the issue to make sure I didn't miss anything, and I couldn't find anything, so if I did, let me know what that's in reference to, because I do not know about that. I don't remember Dupe joining the team or being a part of it. I don't think he's ever actually been affiliated with the X-Men in that way, although he was for a while the receptionist slash janitor, I think, for the Jean Grey School of Higher Learning, so he has definitely been X-Men adjacent, but not actually a member of the main team. Perhaps that's why he's listed as being like a former X-Men affiliated person thing? What is Dupe even exactly? What is he? All I know is that Dupe should get to be a member of the X-Men because honestly his powers are crazy. He's one of those characters that can basically do just about anything whenever it's needed, so his powers are basically limitless with the way he tends to be written, which is why I would love to see him on the team. I mean, he can like move through margins of comics. That's pretty crazy. Not a lot of characters can do that. Number 8, Hijack. I mean, you know me, you can never have too many technopaths on the X-Men, hence why I'm suggesting that Hijack deserves membership. For those who are unfamiliar, Hijack is a mutant whose powers allow him to control cars, hence his name, Hijack, because he could basically hijack, well, just about any car he wanted, whenever he wanted. Sure, his powers aren't as crazy in terms of his relation to technology as somebody like Forge, let's say, or even someone like Trinary, who can literally communicate with tech, or even Cypher, whose powers have been expanded to include technology, being able to understand tech and therefore in a way kind of communicate with it and sort of get it to do his bidding. But at the same time, I still feel like Hijack is pretty cool, and I also just love people that have car-related powers. So can we get David Bond on the team or what? I also know Hijack has not been like around recently, but that's also definitely why I want him on the team. Number 7, Nature Girl. Nature Girl was part of the X-Men Green team. However, that team has actually never been considered as an official team by the X-Men, okay? It was basically made because Nature Girl just couldn't take what was happening to the planet anymore, and she decided to go out on her own. So this is definitely not a licensed team. The X-Men are not like, yeah, you go Nature Girl. Everyone was like, whoa, Nature Girl. Even readers, a lot of readers were like, whoa. There were a few other mutants who ended up getting recruited to join X-Men Green, or mutant-related folks in some cases, including Curse and oddly Sauron, who, you know, isn't a mutant but is also a mutate. But when it comes to X-Men Green, it's not even considered an official X team, any way you slice it. So I really feel like Nature Girl deserves her turn at being on the X-Men team. I'm actually surprised she hasn't been on the X-Men earlier, and while now she's in a totally different place, she is honestly an extremely powerful character. Her powers allow her to reach out to nature and communicate with it, basically possessing nature empathy, if you will. It's using this ability that she is able to often get the animals of Earth to do what she asks of them, but not because they must obey her, more because they just actually really like and respect Nature Girl, just as she really likes and respects them. So they usually are just like, yeah, we'll do that because that sounds like a cool thing to do for you. and maybe their goals are aligned as well a lot of the times. Number 6, strong guy. Energy absorption powers are some of the strongest around, which is why I'm honestly surprised that strong guy has not yet been formally invited to become a member of the X-Men mainstay team. He's been a powerful resident of New Tien, and in that way a sort of X-Men, and he was also part of the X-Men team during X-Men Disassembled, but that was also a time where we had like multiple X-Men teams going on all at once, and at the time I don't even think that strong guy was part of like the initial 2 main teams that started out there, Red and Gold, and at that time I mean pretty much everyone that was a mutant was kind of given a membership card, so it wasn't as exclusive as being on the team usually is. Don't know if we can really count it. More of an X-Men mob than an X-Men team really, so I'd still like to see strong guy added onto the main roster. Number 5, Eyeboy. So this is a pretty selfish point, I'm gonna be honest with you folks. I really love Eyeboy, and if you have watched the channel for some time, you probably already know this about me. I'm a big Eyeboy fan. I also love Peeper, or Peepers as he has been known before. I don't know, I just really love people with eye powers, I guess. It's a thing. I don't know why, I just like it. Eyeboy is therefore definitely someone I would love to see on the team. His powers are often underrated as well in my opinion. He's covered in eyes, which sounds useless and weird to most people I guess, but it actually gives him all kinds of different types of sight. He can see things that most people can't see. He has telescopic vision, can see really far away, he can see things that other people wouldn't even know exist. It's even implied that he can see into other dimensions as well. Personally, I think having someone that is that kind of perspective to see pretty much anything around you, even stuff that isn't visible, would be super useful. Speaking of seeing things that aren't visible, he also has microscopic vision too. Number 4, Kid Omega. Kid Omega is one that surprises me as having never been an X-Men, but I guess he's really only been X-Men affiliated, being a student at multiple schools. He has also been a member of the X-Force as well, but not the main X-Men team I don't think. Quentin is extremely powerful and has been destined to be the Phoenix before in the comics, so I think he would make a great addition to the team should they ever want to consider him for a full membership. And he just returned, so we could have him. He's old now, but he came back. We thought he was dead, but no. Number 3, Madeline Pryor. While Madeline has played ally to the X-Men on multiple occasions, she is not herself an X-Men, nor has she ever been an X-Men. Although she has like said to me my X-Men before, I believe. She gotta say that during Dark Web, I think, but she doesn't have official status. To me, this is a travesty considering how many other villains have gotten to join up with the X-Men team. Sure, Madeline did some terrible things, but she also has one of the most tragic stories out there. She was created to be used as a pawn by Sinister to get the child he so desperately wanted. In a romance with Scott Summers, she was abandoned, left alone with their newborn when he returned to the X-Men after Jean was revealed to still be alive. Maddie has had it kinda tough in regards to her life. Could you also imagine the power the X-Men team would have if she joined up while Jean was also on the team? I mean, that is a lot of psionic power. If we want to have like a completely psionic X-Men team, I think you definitely need Madeline Pryor on it personally. Tempo. Tempo is super cool. Having seen a little bit more of her through the Marauder series, I have been greatly impressed with her power set. Tempo basically has the power to manipulate and, in a way, control time. She can even stop it. She can speed it up, she can slow it down, she can change the tempo of it, if you will, and can manipulate it in a way. Time control to me is something that has always been super powerful. Having a character that control or manipulate time in this way would make sense for the X-Men, and they have had a few time manipulators before affiliated with them, but I don't think ever Tempo, alas. Tempo, I think, was actually considered to be one of the people we could vote for to join the X-Men with the elections in recent years. However, she sadly did not win the vote, and as a result, she didn't get to be on the team. But hey, at least she did get to be on the secret X-Men team, basically made up of the people that didn't get to be voted onto the team, which I thought was pretty cool. And later, she would end up joining the Marauders, and I have enjoyed reading her in that, so hey. Number 1, Manifold. Wow. What can I say? I cannot believe that Manifold has not yet been an X-Men member. That's insane. That's a mistake. Someone should fix that. Manifold is probably one of the most powerful teleporters we have out there, and that's because he isn't even really technically a teleporter. Manifold's powers allow him to communicate with the universe and basically ask it to literally bend over backwards to do his bidding. He can ask the universe to fold itself in half so that he can jump from one point to another point, moving even all the way across the universe and beyond, seemingly teleporting, but really just communicating with the cosmos. The only downside to his powers is that they really only work in the 616 reality, but still, that shouldn't limit him getting X-Men status, because we've seen people like Nightcrawler become an X-Men, and Nightcrawler's powers really only allow him to teleport short distances, and Kurt also tends to tire quite a bit over time when he uses them. Sorry Kurt, but it's true. The best that we've seen from Manifold in regards to his affiliation with mutant teams that are X-related, I believe, is Sword. And even with the Sword team, they've really only been mutant related in recent years. Other than that, they're just really a space superhero slash shield team normally, so yeah. Number 10. Luktuka the Knower. Luktuka is a strange new character who I kinda love. Their powers are very interesting and unique. Luktuka in essence knows the location of everything and anything. Being considered as an Omega level mutant, as so many are in Arako who sit on the Great Ring, Luktuka resembles a night sky, looking like a sheet covered in stars with fabric that's made up from the cosmos. So cool! Luktuka's powers also might not seem so great in the sense that, you know, spatial awareness, while useful, isn't exactly considered powerful even when it's on a cosmic and universal scale, possibly even multiversal. Although the amount of times I've put down my phone and not known where it is, when it's even in my hand, I feel like having someone like you could just be like, yo, where's my phone? And they could be like, no, it's right there. That would be pretty useful. However, when combined with the powers of a teleporter, while still strange, Luktuka's powers could be seen as exceptionally great, because then you can just like teleport anywhere. It's crazy.
Number 9. Cypher. Cypher has what some people believe to be a pretty horrible mutant ability, especially when it comes to combat. Personally, I would kill to be able to subconsciously translate any written or spoken language, human or alien. He can also subconsciously understand body language and intention, as well as decipher codes and computer languages. After he was resurrected, and also so Marvel could make him actually useful, everything he sees is interpreted into language, basically making him able to read life. Everything I just said is strange enough, but I can wrap my head around it to some degree, I guess. But don't you dare sit here and tell me that this man can speak binary code. In New Mutants Volume 3, number 14, a guy operating a mech comes upon Cypher during a battle, and Dougie Boy speaks to the mech saying, "Hello, you don't have to do this. You know, I can set you free, show you how to think for yourself." The dude operating the mech understands him, since he's speaking English, but for some reason, the mech, which isn't artificial intelligence, also understands him, boots the operator out, and begins talking in zeros and ones. What?
Number 8. Manifold. If you thought Luktuka was an interesting character, wait till you hear about Manifold. Although with Luktuka being newer, you may already know of Manifold, because Manifold's been around for a while. But do you know how exactly his powers work? That is what is so cool, but can also be kinda confusing. Manifold is seen as a massively powerful teleporter, but the interesting thing is he actually isn't. I mean, he is really powerful, but he's not technically a teleporter. Instead, Eden Vesey's mutant powers are based in communication, specifically communication with space. He is considered a universal shaper who can basically communicate with the universe over 616 and ask it to bend and fold for him, which is how he appears to teleport himself and others such great distances. But really, it's just talking.
Number 7. Thumbelina. Christina Anderson has an ability that quite a few characters in comic books have. That would be the ability to shrink. Thumbelina can reduce herself down to about 1/4 of an inch tall. That ability is perfectly fine in my eyes. Like I said, lots of characters can do this. My problem with Thumbelina, and also some other shrinkers, is how the heck do they retain their full-size strength when they get smaller? Or in Thumbelina's case, how the hell does she get stronger when she shrinks? I'm sorry to try and bring physics into any debate about superheroes and their various powers, but it makes absolutely no sense in the laws of physics that someone who is smaller can be more strong than they were when they were regular size. Ants, for example, if they were the size of a person, they would be insanely strong, as they are able to carry 20 times their body weight. So that's like an average person being able to carry like a small SUV or something. But since ants are so damn small, that means they can carry like a leaf or something. Thumbelina should not be able to knock someone out when she is 1/4 of an inch tall. I'm sorry, that's all I gotta say.
Number 6. Iska the Unbeaten. Iska's powers are really cool, don't get me wrong, but how does it work exactly? I feel like we still have a lot of exploring to do with this character before we can really firmly answer that question. I've been reading Iska since she came into the comics, and I'm still confused. Iska made her first appearance during the 2020 X-Men series, appearing in a tie-in issue to the X-Men crossover event 10 of Swords, which I still personally hold a great fondness for. As such, I also hold a fondness for this character, the sister-in-law to Apocalypse through his mutant wife Genesis. Iska is a mutant of the long-lost mutant island of Arako, and her powers allow her to always win, but sometimes they also force her to always win, like against her will, and then other times, betting against her even can affect the result of a contest, even if she herself isn't involved in that. How does that work? Her powers also do not just extend to physical fights, but all means of competition. So like, if you're, I don't know, doing a coin toss with Iska, she gotta win.
Number 5, tag. Okay, I actually kinda wish I had Brian Cruz's power. It just seems like the perfect chaos creating ability. Tag's ability, known as the pariah effect, allows him to use a form of telepathy when he touches someone that causes the target to emit a psionic signal, which would make them a target for others to run away from or to run towards. Whichever way people would run, they would do it while being fully aware of what they're doing, but unable to control themselves. If they were being controlled to run away, they would continue to do so until they were about 100 feet away. But if the signal caused them to run towards whoever it is, then they would dogpile on top of the target. What's strange is that he could also control who was affected by the ability. Like, how? He only made one person it, so how does he decide who runs away and who doesn't? He could also make whoever was it run away from themselves. So in other words, they would just run uncontrollably and in random directions, which is actually kind of hilarious. He also would always say, "You're it," which is kind of misleading because that person can't tag someone else to make them it, which is kind of unfair as well. So
Number 4, Dupe. Ranking a little lower for me because he's not necessarily a mutant maybe, is Dupe. Dupe is a creature who often is lumped in with the mutants, but maybe isn't one? We don't really know what Dupe is, never mind his power set. Dupe is basically an unstoppable force and has been implied to be a mutant, an alien, a mutant alien, or something else entirely. As of right now, his origin is classified on his own wiki with him being an artificial being, which really doesn't help to clarify anything. If he is a mutant, and I'm not saying conclusively that he is or that he isn't, as I still feel like his origin in general can be really contested at this point, his powers really are hard to classify. It's kind of like he's an old school superhero in the sense that he seems to have powers for whatever task he needs to accomplish at the time, including resurrection, the power of funk, love eyes, breaking the fourth wall, moving between panels, and even magic. Dupe has been spotted seemingly fighting alongside the mutants as recently as the AXE Judgment Day event, implying that he is at least allied with Krakoa. For those of you that don't think he's a mutant, I still kind of think he might be. Who knows?
Number 3, Hijack. The mutant known as David Bond has the oddly specific ability to control vehicular mechanisms with his thoughts. Basically, this is a form of technopathy, and he has been able to control automobiles and shield helicarriers, starting their engines, steering them, and even opening their doors. He has also been shown to be able to control high-tech suits of armor. Now, this kind of leads me to have more questions than anything else. Like, can he control motorcycles? What about bicycles? Rollerblades? Does the vehicle need to have an internal computer? What's the deal with opening and closing car doors? Does that not count as a form of telepathy? Why can he control high-tech suits of armor? What if a car has mechanical issues? Can he tell? Does the vehicle need to be in complete functioning order? Does it need to be able to turn on? I have so many questions and like no answers.
Number 2, Ice Cream. Ice Cream. Oh boy, what a wonderful weirdo this is. You know how much I have a strange affinity for mutants who have eye-based mutations and visual power sets if you're, you know, usually on this channel, and if you are usually on this channel, you should subscribe if you aren't already. But despite the I in Ice Cream's name, he is not one of those. Instead, his mutant power seems to be that he can turn himself into ice cream. Get it? Ice cream. He's only appeared once, I believe, in the comics, making a singular appearance in a strange comic in and of itself from Marvel, Obnoxio the Clown, issue number 1. In this weird single issue, Obnoxio is a clown and he's employed to act as entertainment for a surprise birthday party at the X-Mansion that is being hosted for young X-member Kitty Pryde. While this is going on, Ice Cream, a villain, also appears and sneaks into the mansion, hoping to coordinate a stealthy attack on the X-Men. Instead, he ends up attempting to get Obnoxio out of the way, which he kind of succeeds in, only to later be captured in a block of ice, because he can turn into ice cream. What I want to know is, what was Ice Cream's plan of attack with his power set? Is anyone on the main team featured here lactose intolerant? Was that his plan? I have to know.
Number 1, El Guapo. Tell me that someone, thanks to genetic mutation, can fold space or speak binary code or always win, and I'll look at you sideways, but I'll nod and walk away. But you tell me that some guy named Robbie Rodriguez, thanks to a genetic mutation, has no actual powers of his own, but instead has a symbiotic relationship with a superpowered flying skateboard, which followed his mental commands and sometimes even seemed to have a personality of its own or acted on his subconscious thoughts. I'm sorry, I'm out. I'm done. Where did the skateboard skateboard come from? How did he discover this ability? When did this mutant power activate? Can he do this to other skateboards or inanimate objects in general? You can't just give someone the most unique and insane mutant ability and explain none of it.
Number 10. Destiny. Truly one of the most useless, I would say at least, in a fight, Destiny is still an extremely powerful mutant. While she might not be able to kick your butt physically, she could easily destroy most of her opponents simply with the knowledge she has of the future, and using it to hurt those who stand in her way and advance her own plots. Destiny is also one of those people who is a masterful and skilled manipulator of scenarios, often choosing to keep secrets in order to make sure her plans go to plan. When Mr. Sinister attempted to eliminate the Quiet Council, or, most of them anyways, Destiny proved to be one of his greatest challenges in accomplishing this feat. As soon as Mr. Sinister focused on a direct plan of attack, it actually caused Destiny's powers to trigger, allowing her to sense the future of what he was planning, thereby preventing it from coming to pass by informing others on how to best avert that disaster. When you have a precog like Destiny, she can prove very challenging to get around, especially when she's someone like Mystique protecting and guarding her too, and especially if you happen to try to target her. I think the best course of action if you're going after Destiny is try not to target her. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, and if you also love mutants as much as I do, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 9. Dr. Reyes. Dr. Cecilia Reyes is also a mutant, hence why she is one of the lead doctors on the mutant island nation of Krakoa. Although you might forget the fact that she's a mutant when it comes to the Good Doctor, because our focus is usually on her as a medical professional, as opposed to her as, a mutant superhero. When it comes to being a mutant, her powers allow her to summon a bioshield of sorts, a very tight-knit biofield forms around her, and generally also instinctively appears at a whim whenever Cecilia becomes the target of an attack. However, this isn't the power that comes in most handy with Reyes, whose real usefulness does come from her skill as a gifted doctor and surgeon, who is also more familiar with mutant genetics than most doctors would be. Although at one point I do believe Jean Grey actually declared herself an impromptu surgeon as well, speaking of mutants that can be medical people. But Dr. Reyes, I'm pretty sure, is still one of the few mutants who actually has, significant medical training and experience. Unlike Jean just walking in and being like, I'm a surgeon now. It's like, okay, Jean. You got enough going on. Number 8. Shark Girl. Shark Girl isn't particularly useless in my mind, but she also has some setbacks when it comes to her abilities, in the sense that she isn't always in control of them. And I think that we should acknowledge that, so that's why she's here. Shark Girl's mutant powers allow her to turn into a shark, and she doesn't suffer from being on land while in her shark form. She's kind of like, a shark. She's like a shark, a humanoid shark, being able to breathe both on land and underwater, but she is susceptible to the temptation of blood. Ayara can go into a bloodlust, and as a result of this, she'll actually lose control over herself and basically enter into like a bloodthirsty rage. However, that being said, I still feel like she is underappreciated when it comes to what she is capable of. Not only can she seamlessly transition from shore to sea, being just as at home in the depths of the ocean as she is on the land, but Ayara as Shark Girl also gains super strength and super speed, so yeah. Number 7. Curse. Curse is actually one of my favorite new mutants in the comics. I love Curse. Curse is a mutant whose power forces her to curse her enemies, and if she doesn't have any enemies on hand, forces her to curse those around her. She can't keep the curses in, otherwise they basically do damage to her, and while she can control the type of curses that she grants to others or that she casts on others, performing nicer curses also seems to have a physical cost for her. So typically she has to make them kinda nasty in the interests of self-preservation. But also, Curse seems to generally enjoy making other people miserable and causing them harm to an extent, especially if it's people that she doesn't like or just simply doesn't care for. This is what makes her such an interesting and fascinating character to me, but makes her a dangerous character for most heroes to work with. The other thing I love about Curse is that she isn't really a hero, nor is she a villain. I wouldn't say she directly aligns with either side, although I could see her leaning, I guess, a little bit more towards villain if she wanted to. Currently, Curse is lending her talents for better, and I guess for worse, to the X-Men Green Team, which is a small mutant team focused on fighting aggressively to save the environment, led by Nature Girl, who recently underwent a secondary mutation after deciding that she basically had enough and decided to let her anger motivate her activism. Number 6. Vanisher. Vanisher is an old school mutant villain who made his first appearance all the way back in the second ever issue of X-Men. Yeah, pretty old character. Well, his power set is actually pretty wild, allowing him to seemingly teleport almost anywhere instantly. With his limitations for bringing others and the distance not yet clearly defined, he also was pretty easily defeated by the X-Men, or more specifically, their mentor, Professor X, the first time around. While admittedly, the young X-Men did struggle against the Vanisher during their first encounter, Professor X easily capacitated and defeated Vanisher by just wiping his memory. A pretty dark way to deal with a tough villain. But I do love how weirdly easy it was for Vanisher to be defeated. Vanisher has since made some appearances in the comics, but now in modern day his powers are even less impressive considering the caliber of teleporter heroes we're now familiar with. Vanisher doesn't really stand a chance against that, despite the fact that his power set is still pretty useful because, I mean, teleporting. Still, I feel like Vanisher versus Magic, I'm gonna put my money on Magic in that one. Number 5. Trinary. Trinary is another favorite of mine, and yet I can understand how some might not see her as the most useful or powerful mutant that we have, given her power set. She is able to communicate with technology and often get technology to work with her and do whatever it is that she needs. Seemingly, this actually isn't because Trinary can bend tech to her will, more that she's just able to communicate with tech and obviously knows exactly what to say to build an alliance, a connection to the technology, thereby encouraging the tech that she speaks with to actually help her with whatever she needs, of, their own volition. She might not be great in a fist fight, but if that fist fight happens to be against a computer, or if there might be a computer nearby who could be compelled to help Trinary in a fight, I mean, she's pretty useful in that regard, so yeah. And I imagine she'd be a star in a show like BattleBots, or she'd simply, just rally the bots and then free them from their human masters, create all kinds of chaos. I could see that being a thing too. Trinary's like, these tech do not want to fight for you, so they're free now. Number 4. Egg. Egg is the epitome of a mutant who is useless, but who actually winds up being also extremely useful. Egg is Fabio Medina. He used to be known by the mutant name of Goldballs, but ended up changing it after he realized that the balls that he was actually able to expel from his body as projectiles were actually infertile eggs. He ended up joining the Five on Krakoa, who are in charge of bringing back any mutants lost by following through with resurrection protocols. While not particularly useful in a fight, as proven by the fact that Egg has been killed multiple times over in the comics just recently, probably suffering the most deaths among the members of the Five, Egg is still a crucial member of this team. Without the eggs that he produces, resurrection would not be possible, hence why he is considered extremely useful. Just maybe not, super useful in a combat scenario. But if you need to be resurrected, Egg is definitely one of the 5 mutants that you should call. Number 3. Cypher. Cypher is of course a mutant who has often been put down as useless, but this was before his mutant glow up. In the last few years in the comics, we've seen a major upgrade to Cypher's power set. Initially, he was just, really good at communicating in the sense of being able to understand all languages, which, is useful, but definitely not anything special when it comes to some of the grand foes that the X-Men are pitted against. I mean, if you can just understand different languages, that's like basically having a translator on hand, so yeah. Over the years though, the meaning of his powers and the interpretation of them has changed and evolved. Eventually, Cypher also learned how to communicate with technology, and even learned how to communicate non-verbally, with fighting also being interpreted as a language that he could master. Although he hasn't recently been as present in the comics prior to Jonathan Hickman leaving his position as head of X, Cypher was probably one of the most important and influential mutants in the comics before that happened, and I would say he still kinda is. Without being in the spotlight as much, Cypher is still super important in terms of the lore and the world building that relates to Krakoa, as he is the only one that can easily communicate with and fully comprehend the sentient mutant island of Krakoa. Just can't really have Krakoa without Cypher. Forge. Forge is kinda a squishy guy, which is why he makes our cut, and not particularly well known for his skills, in a fistfight. But he is well known for making cool stuff, especially cool weapons, and because of that, he is actually extremely useful. Many also forget that Forge has experience with shamanism, and not only has a mutant origin, but an origin that is also attached to the world of magic and mysticism, which honestly is pretty cool. However, for those who want to argue that Forge could march in there alongside Cyclops, I think that I would say Forge actually prefers to outfit other heroes than do that himself. Although he could do so, I guess, if he wanted, Forge is generally best on the sidelines, and I think he knows this, helping his fellow teammates and allies to strategize their way to victory, and helping to outfit his fellow mutants to make sure they survive the battle and are left standing afterwards, no matter how tough or likewise how squishy they might be normally. Number 1. Dazzler. I mean, of course, you know, we're doing a useless list, and even useless but useful, so obviously Dazzler's gonna take my number 1 spot, because she's my number 1 gal. Dazzler is taking our number 1 spot, not because of how useless she seems, but because of how truly useful her powers are, despite the fact that everyone else wants to call her useless. The only thing that really makes her seemingly useless is the fact that Alison Blair actually really prefers to use her powers for her performances as opposed to being, you know, the team leader of the X-Men, which honestly she easily could be. She's been an X-leader of sorts before, but not for the main X-Men team. At least, not as far as I know. Dazzler has powers that have been described before to be potentially unlimited in terms of just how much damage she could do. She can transmute sound into light, and while her light shows in her concerts might seem kinda tame if you're like, yeah, but how you gonna fight with that? She's also used her power set to defeat and defend against heavy hitters like Enchantress and the Hulk. And there's a lot of cool things she can do with that light, okay? Which I would also say means that she is honestly way more useful than people usually give her credit for. Still though, Dazzler prefers to be on the sidelines when it comes to heroics and leave that to the professional 9-to-5 superheroes. But just remember that in a pinch, she could step in and prove herself to be even more powerful than some of the most famous mutant heroes around. Move over, Wolverine. Move over, Cyclops. It's Dazzler time. Number 10. Jean Grey. Probably the most iconic mutant to have ever merged with the Phoenix Force and acted as its host would be, of course, Jean Grey. And there are many who would also consider her to be still one of the most unstoppable hosts for the cosmic entity pretty much of all time. This isn't even just because of feats she has accomplished while merged with the Phoenix Force, but because even without it, she is known as a force to be reckoned with. Or maybe not reckoned with. I mean, I know I wouldn't want to deal with that reckoning. I'm not messing with Jean. I don't think you should either. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd and you love it when I get to talk mutants, I love when I get to talk mutants, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. I know I'll be giving it a thumbs up because I get to talk about mutants. Woo! Number 9. Stepford Cuckoos. The Stepford Cuckoos are like Emma's children. Basically little Emma clones that were made with her own eggs, which were actually stolen from her when she was comatose. So genetically speaking, they are like Emma's offspring, but also were made almost exactly in her image, hence, you know, why we sometimes refer to them as clones. Kind of a little bit of both, really. Like Emma, they too have been considered by the Phoenix Force as potential preferred hosts. For a time, they were even chosen by the entity to act as its hosts, with 3 out of the initial 5 who were still alive at the time becoming Phoenixes, and the other 2 being resurrected, kind of to an extent. Although the Stepford Cuckoos would not maintain their status as Phoenix Force hosts, and struggle with both programming within them and the Phoenix Force basically vying for control over them from within, they would at least get to keep fragments of the Phoenix Force within themselves afterwards, trapped in their secondary mutation, their Diamond Hearts, which if you didn't know, the Stepford Cuckoos have Diamond Hearts. However, eventually even these Phoenix fragments within them would escape, so sad. No longer Phoenix at all. Number 8. Magik. Although Magik wasn't a host for the Phoenix Force for as long as some of the others have been that are on this list, she is still one of the most capable mutants in my mind to have been a host. Magik is Illyana Rasputin, younger sister to Mikhail and Pyotr Rasputin. Her mutant power is known to be teleportation, but thanks to her ending up trapped in the limbo dimension for basically years, she is also pretty adept when it comes to experiences with demons and with magic. For a good long while, Magik was the ruler of limbo, and while in that realm possessed unlimited power, and even when outside of it, Magik was probably not someone that you would want to mess with. Even today, even with her not being the ruler of limbo, you don't want to mess with her. She not only is a mutant teleporter who is gifted in magic, but she is also an amazing fighter as well. The only reason that she even lost the Phoenix Force was because she was willing to take things further than her brother Colossus was at the time, who was also a host, for a piece of the Phoenix Force. This prompted a disagreement between brother and sister, with basically Spider-Man egging them on because it was to his advantage. Their fight escalated and resulted in them both losing their connection to the Phoenix Force, which was instead passed on to two of the other members of the once Phoenix Five, strengthening their connection to the Force. You know. Number 7. Namor, or Namor. Namor is simply one of the most powerful mutants around. Completely unstoppable in that almost every element of the character, in terms of power anyways, is considered to be close to, I would say, a 10 out of 10. Maybe even higher than that. Namor's pretty powerful. Namor is super strong, durable, can fly, can survive underwater, and is royalty, often having the full support of Atlantis, which he can pretty much call on at any time. He's smart, conniving, and ruthless, which makes him probably one of the most unstoppable mutants to have ever existed, even considering the fact that he is actually the first mutant to have ever existed at Marvel Comics. Fun fact. Namor didn't have the power of the Phoenix Force for long when he was part of the Phoenix Five, but what he lacks in length of time as a host, he definitely makes up for in raw, default power of a mutant, and also just as a character. Number 6. Emma Frost. Emma Frost is a mutant who we know as being super powerful just kind of by default, I would say. This isn't even so much because of what she is capable of with her powers, although that too is quite impressive, but because Emma is both a survivor and a thriver. She's just a powerful character. She is resourceful, smart, cunning, and hardworking. As a result, there isn't much that Emma can't do when she puts her mind to work. And I don't just mean psionically as a telepath either. Emma is an extremely successful teacher and businesswoman besides, which is all a testament to the strength of her sense of determination, and I think to an extent of her character. Emma ends up being one of the last mutants standing amidst the Phoenix Five during Avengers vs. X-Men, and this isn't the only time that Emma would end up as a host for the Phoenix either. Emma had actually already ended up as the host for the entity prior to this event, albeit temporarily, although of course that time around she almost completely was corrupted by the sheer power of the Force, so there is that I guess to consider. Number 5. Kid Omega. Quentin Quire hasn't really had much time as the Phoenix Force because we've only really ever seen him actually become the Phoenix in an alternate future reality. But although we only got to see him briefly, his appearance did at least seem impressive there. In the alternate future of 13729, one of the realities dubbed as the Future X-Men, Quentin eventually grows up, has a son, and yes, fulfills his self-prophesied destiny in becoming the host of the Phoenix Force. Number 4. Cyclops. Cyclops isn't usually one of the first mutants that comes to my mind when I think like unstoppable, or most unstoppable. I mean, Cyclops is unstoppable, but you know, he's not usually in my top 10 in my mind. But when it comes to his time as the Phoenix Force host during Avengers vs. X-Men, well, that's a rare incident where he actually does really stand out as an unstoppable character. This is not because of Cyclops' base abilities and power levels, which, you know, not to knock those, but it's actually because when he was in fact a host of the Phoenix, he ended up being the last one standing as a member of the Phoenix Five, even outlasting Emma Frost. And when his old mentor, Professor X, came to try and plead with Cyclops, basically free him from the Phoenix's influence, helping a whole cast of superpowered characters to defeat him, even that failed to actually stop Scott, which is pretty crazy. In fact, all they succeeded in doing there was basically pissing Scott off, which resulted in the Phoenix-infused Cyclops killing Charles in response. Number 3. Rachel Summers. Rachel Summers has the potential to be even more impressive than her own mother when it comes to her capabilities with the Phoenix Force. She is the alternate reality daughter of Jean Grey, aka Marvel Girl, and Scott Summers, aka Cyclops. And she's also kind of the daughter of the Phoenix, I think, because I think in the reality she hails from 811, Jean and the Phoenix are like merged too, so she's also kind of literally the Phoenix's daughter. She might not be quite as untamed as Jean is, but in fact it is Rachel's more tempered sense of control as the Phoenix host that makes her so powerful. Rachel has been depicted as a more stable Phoenix host in comparison to Jean, and despite her own fiery persona, is a lot less likely to go off the rail and do something crazy like, you know, destroy a planet. Even though technically that wasn't even really Jean exactly who did that, but the Phoenix who had adopted Jean's consciousness and was in essence basically impersonating her. But either way, we sure do like to hold it over Jean's head anyways, so yeah, poor Jean. There's some characters in comics that I feel like we hold so many things over their head, and Jean is definitely one of those characters where I'm like, I feel like she's done enough. I feel like also it wasn't really even Jean technically. We can forgive her. Oh well. Number 2. Wolverine. If you're wondering when exactly this happened in the main continuity, I'm sorry to say that it did not happen in the main continuity, but it did happen in the reality of Earth 14412, where Logan became known as Old Man Phoenix. In this reality, humanity was completely wiped out, and even though Logan himself also somehow died, he returned to life later on as a chosen host for the Phoenix Force, which you know, does make sense. That is what the Phoenix does. It loves to resurrect people, you know what I mean? He would also be the person to lend his powers to the alternate future version of Allfather Thor in this reality to help him in his fight against Doom. At this point in Doom's history in this alternate future, he had not only survived humanity being wiped out, but he also had acquired various different superhero-based powers and artifacts, which basically gave him a massive power boost. Fortunately, Thor, with a Phoenix Force boosted Mjolnir, was able to take on and defeat Doom. Of course, you know, Wolverine kind of had to give up his life to make that happen, but of course, it's the Phoenix Force, so afterwards Logan was just brought back, because that's how the Phoenix Force do. Number 1. Hope Summers. Definitely one of the most powerful Phoenix Force holders out there among mutants would have to be Hope Summers. Hope is just hands down one of the most powerful mutants around, period, and is basically nigh unstoppable, just like across the board. Well, I mean, you might be able to stop her if you have like a bunch of clones of Moira McTaggart at your disposal, which you can then use to build and explore a multitude of possibilities via the creation and destruction of alternate timelines. I digress. Most people don't have that anyways. Other than that, I would say that Hope is pretty unstoppable. She's so powerful that many writers tend to just completely leave her off the table, or make it so there is some reason that she can't really like be actively involved in the story. She's just a little too powerful. Case in point, when she was at the center of Avengers vs. X-Men, but basically was relegated to the background for most of that event, with the excuse of kind of like it basically being like for her own good or her protection. And yet even in that story, she was instrumental in solving the problem of actually what to do with the Phoenix Force, with the help of Scarlet Witch using it to bring back the mutants and then defeating the cosmic entity by in essence banishing it from existence, for a while at least. I will also add that I think one of the most insane feats you can accomplish with the Phoenix Force becoming one of its hosts is to basically merge with it and then even in the face of all that power, reject it, which is basically what Hope did, as her time as the Phoenix was like super short, but to me that's just like more unstoppable. Number 10. Gwenpool. Gwenpool is truly one of the most unstoppable mutants. In fact, she is so unstoppable that she actually was able to make herself a mutant by willing that origin into existence for herself. I know, it's wild. Gwenpool, for those who are unfamiliar, is an alternate version of Gwen Stacy and Deadpool combined, who hails from an alternate reality not yet given an official number. The temporary reality number assigned to it currently by fans is 565. Gwenpool becomes a mutant after Kamala Khan, the current Miss Marvel, refuses to fight her when Gwen tries to instigate a battle, and instead tries to reason with Gwen. Kamala is the one who suggests that Gwenpool's understanding of the fourth wall and her belief that she is simply a character existing in a comic book could be a story that Gwen created as a result of not wanting to acknowledge the truth. The fact that she is actually a reality warping mutant. Possibly. The idea broke Gwen somewhat and caused her to retcon her own origins, instead becoming a reality warping mutant as Kamala had suggested and finding a home on Krakoa with all the other mutants of Earth 616. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd and if you love it when we talk about mutants, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 9. Rogue. Rogue is a mutant who truly is considered to be one of the most durable around. She can just take in a power set through absorbing someone's powers, permanently adopting it. In fact, some may not know, but that is actually how Rogue is able to fly and where she gets her strength and her durability from. She actually stole those powers from Carol Danvers, aka Captain Marvel, aka formerly Miss Marvel, which is how she was known at the time. For a long time, Rogue was unable to properly control her powers, causing her to accidentally steal people's memories, powers, and even psyches just from touching them, and causing Rogue to often be much removed from her other fellow mutants, friends, and loved ones, afraid she might hurt them accidentally after she became a hero, and resulting in her basically wearing fully covering outfits, except for her face, of course. However, it was this very fear that apparently prevented Rogue from controlling her abilities, and once she faced it, she gained better control over her powers, making her virtually unstoppable, which is also probably why a lot of writers keep her on the sidelines, or prefer to. She's kinda hard to write because she is so unstoppable now. Number 8. Magneto. Pretty much nothing stops Magneto, not even losing his heart. Now, if you've seen our Unstoppable Superheroes list, then you know what I'm talking about. So for this point, I'm going to talk about another insane feat of Magneto's, other than when he defeated Uranos while completely heartless with some help from Storm. Not only can Magneto sustain his own flow of blood without a heart using his powers, but he could also seriously mess you up by manipulating your blood in your body. Or even worse, mess you up by just pulling out all of the iron from your blood. We've seen him do that too, and it was pretty horrifying, I gotta say. Magneto has also used his mastery of magnetism to perform the kind of blood witchcraft you'd associate more with a magic user, a warlock if we were talking D&D classes, I suppose. Magneto has used this ability to manipulate the blood of his victims to also control their minds, turning them into mindless zombies who will do his bidding as a result of manipulating the flow of blood to their brains. Who needs telepathy when you have magnetic mutant powers, I guess? Number 7. Apocalypse. I mean, there is a whole reality based around the idea of what if Apocalypse was unable to be stopped. This reality is known as Earth 295, aka the Age of Apocalypse. And in this world, Apocalypse becomes pretty much inevitable thanks to the early demise of one man, Charles Xavier, aka Professor X. AOA just goes to show you what a force Apocalypse is, and if you aren't convinced by an alternate reality where Apocalypse rules the world, you can also turn to a more recent X-Men event, Ten of Swords, aka the Otherworld Tournament. During this fight, Apocalypse faced his wife, who was possessed, and even against the seemingly unbeatable foe that was Annihilation, Apocalypse still managed to win, saving his wife and freeing her from the influence of the Golden Helm, while also basically saving all of Krakoa, Mutantkind, and Otherworld, possibly the world itself, outside of Otherworld. Number 6. Jean Grey. You know how it goes. We have to talk about the most powerful original X-Men member if we're talking about unstoppable mutants. I just gotta do it. Jean Grey is a force to be reckoned with, and not just because she was the host for the Phoenix Force either. Even without the insane power of the Phoenix Force bonded to her, Jean has done some pretty impossible things, including almost single-handedly defeating Null during the Absolute Carnage event. And okay, yeah, so she didn't really single-handedly defeat Null one-on-one, but honestly, she probably could have if she really wanted to. She was, at the very least, integral to uncovering the God of Symbiote's weakness. Jean has been an unstoppable force many times over, and even while serving on the X-Men team recently, used her powers to single-handedly defeat Nightmare, who has managed to terrorize even Doctor Strange before, and she used her power to defeat Cordyceps Jones and his entire casino, simply by trapping him in an illusion while the X-Men basically did their thing. From within that illusion, Jean says it best when it comes to just how powerful she truly is in issue number 11 of the recent X-Men series. I was Marvel Girl, now I am Jean Grey. I did not even let the Phoenix command me, so what chance do you have? Ooh, fair. I would never try to command Jean Grey. I would only let Jean Grey command me. Number 5. Hope Summers. Hope is pretty understandably unstoppable. I mean, she, combined with the powers of Wanda, was even powerful enough to defeat the Phoenix Force, which is known for being extremely stubborn, resilient, and of course, pretty much invincible and indestructible. Now granted, the Phoenix Force did not remain defeated forever, it was not permanently destroyed, but that wasn't really as a result of Scarlet Witch and or Hope being ineffective. That was more to do with the cyclical nature of comics where, well, rarely anyone or anything remains dead, banished, or defeated. Hope is unstoppable because her mutant power allows her to adopt any other mutant powers, so really the only way to defeat her would be to put her in an isolation chamber, and good luck getting her there, considering that she currently lives on an island where she is constantly surrounded by all kinds of mutants from all different alignments, and where some of the most powerful mutants known to us reside. And then there's also the fact that, I mean, technically Hope kind of worked with Wanda's powers, and now Wanda isn't a mutant, so what does that even mean? Does that mean Hope can just take any powers? I'm still not sure about that. Number 4. Miranda. Miranda doesn't have a fancy code name. She's just Miranda. While not necessarily canon in the main continuity, Miranda is still one of the most unstoppable mutants I could think of, so I'm including her here, despite the fact that I believe she does exist outside 616. Although with her power set, that is something that seems like it could easily and quickly change if Miranda willed it to be so. Miranda is from the story X-Men Worst X-Man Ever, a limited series covering only one arc by Max Bemis and Michael Walsh. We are introduced to Miranda through Bailey Hoskins, who is the self-proclaimed worst X-Man ever. Bailey's powers allow him to self-detonate, in essence a human bomb, but that is all he can do, which means that it's kind of a one-use power, therefore lame and not really useful at all because, you know, if you use it, you'll be dead. Bailey also isn't particularly skilled, athletic, or smart. On the contrary, his friend Miranda can warp reality, shaping it as she sees fit. If Bailey is the worst, Miranda is kinda the best. While Miranda does use her powers, Bailey doesn't even seem to notice at one point, calling her out years later for not doing enough, when, oddly enough, the whole time, Miranda has been unknowingly saving the whole world and possibly the universe multiple times over, which she reveals and is like, I was here the whole time like saving everyone, but you know, I just changed reality so no one really notices. Number 3, Squirrel Girl. I mean, isn't unstoppable just a synonym when you think about it for unbeatable? For some reason, when it comes to mutant lists, I always tend to forget that Squirrel Girl herself is a mutant. I don't know why I forget about Doreen because I love her so much. And this also happens to me despite the fact that when we're first introduced to her in the comics, she advertises herself to Iron Man as a mutant. I guess it's because Squirrel Girl, despite being a mutant, is not often associated with the X-Men, but instead prefers to align herself more with the Avengers, or the Great Lakes Avengers anyways, and other Avenger-based teams. Number 2, Mr. Sinister. Mr. Sinister might strike you as an odd pick for one of our top spots on this list, but with what he has been up to lately, I gotta say, I think he deserves it. As we ramp up to the Sins of Sinister event, which I'm sure is going to be a banger, but also end up destroying the beautiful golden era that has been X-Men comics recently, and Krakoa. Poor Krakoa. Sinister is quickly becoming the most powerful he has ever been. Currently, this is all thanks to his Moira protocols, as revealed in Immortal X-Men. With the Moira protocols, Mr. Sinister can control the timeline, basically tweaking it as he sees fit to better understand the best way for him to shape the world as he would like it to be. If he makes a change that doesn't actually work out for him in the end, he just destroys that powered Moira clone that he has to erase that change and outcome and then kinda like tries again. So this allows him, with all the Moira clones that are powered, to try, well, infinite possibilities for what the world could be, which is pretty scary. This is an insane level of power and could possibly make him one of the most unstoppable mutants ever, unless a whole bunch of mutants and heroes are able to do something about this, though he might not be the most unstoppable. Number 1, Iska the Unbeaten. Iska is truly unbeatable. Even the closest I have ever seen to her being beaten, she wasn't really beaten at all. She still won, but in winning, she also kinda lost. Does that make sense? Let me explain. The Fisher King on planet Arakko, formerly known as Mars, following the events of AXE and the invasion of the Eternal Uranos, who destroyed much of the planet and many of its mutant population, ended up challenging Iska to a battle of understanding. The Fisher King did this as a way of getting back at Iska the traitor, who had turned on her own people in the past, and then did so again when Uranos first attacked the planet, turning on her fellow Seats on the Great Ring of Arakko. This is not something Iska chose to do, but something she was forced to do as a result of her power, because she can never lose. And so to beat her in his own way, knowing that he wouldn't win, the Fisher King challenged her to a battle of understanding, where the winner is the one who most truly understands the meaning of loss. Ho ho ho! As you can imagine, Iska won, but in so doing, she felt great grief over all that she had lost and chose to leave Arakko and resign her seat on the Great Ring. This is the closest I've ever seen to Iska losing something, and still, she technically won because she understood grief the best between the two, or understood the idea of loss, I should say. Iska is such a fascinating character, so while she is gone, for now, from Arakko, I do hope we continue to see her appear in the X-books. I mean, who knows, maybe she'll be the key to defeating Sinister? I don't know.
Number 10, Eternals vs. X-Men. So, the Eternals are basically a celestial created experiment and an offshoot of humanity. They have an eternal struggle against another offshoot, the Deviants. Eternals have hardwired programming to protect the Celestials and to correct excess deviation. Now, a recent revelation about mutants and deviants causes the new Eternal leader, a pretty sinister guy by the name of Druig, to decide that the mutants represent excess deviation. Thanks to that, war is declared on all mutants everywhere. Following their programming, Eternal Assassins come to Krakoa to destroy the Five. Massive war machine Eternals called the Hex are unleashed on Krakoa, and Uranos, one of the oldest and nastiest of all the Eternals, is unleashed on Arakko. Now Uranos is only able to be released from his prison for 1 hour at a time, but within that hour, Uranos is able to take out every member of the Great Ring of Arakko, all of which are Omega level mutants. Hell, in the first 20 minutes, Uranos eradicated Cable, Magneto, and David Haller, otherwise known as Legion. He then goes on to wipe out about 1 million mutants. Number 9. Magneto vs. Red Skull. Now some of you may know this, but I think this is one of my absolute favorite Magneto moments, and he has a lot of good ones, so that's saying something. Magneto and the Red Skull are on opposite sides of history. Magneto grew up in a Jewish family living in Germany during World War II, and we all know Red Skull and Hydra's stance in World War II Germany, so it's safe to say that these two villains don't really like each other, right? In Acts of Vengeance from 1989, Magneto and Red Skull were actually temporarily united, but it's really important to note here that Magneto was unsure whether this was the Red Skull that aided Germany. So Magneto confronted him, and Red Skull did indeed confirm that he was the original. Now it didn't take much for Magneto, the master of magnetism, to overpower the Red Skull, but unlike what you might think, Magneto does not take his life. Instead, Magneto leaves the Skull isolated in a stripped down fallout shelter 20 feet underground. He removed the ladder from the escape hatch, gave him 10 gallons of water, took out his homing transmitters, gave him no food, no light, just water, air, and his own depraved thoughts. Number 8. Hulk vs. Abomination. Compared to their counterparts in the MCU, Abomination and the Hulk in the comics are basically like gods. Comic book Abomination is completely psychotic, and the Hulk is basically a god of rage and strength. So when the Abomination took the life of Betty Ross in the comics using his irradiated blood, he was not getting out of it easily. When they come head to head in the Incredible Hulk Volume 25 from 2000, it's arguably one of the best Incredible Hulk fights I have ever seen. Emil Blonsky comes walking out of the water, and before he even knows what happens, Hulk is on him like shrimps on the Barbie. The ground around them almost instantly becomes rubble. The fight travels underwater and through a dam, flooding an entire town. All the while, these two Green Goliaths are in a close combat slog match. Then, Emil decides to taunt the Hulk, which just makes him angrier, increasing his strength, and the Hulk absolutely pummels the Abomination, laying on fist after fist after fist, causing minor earthquakes and leaving Emil on the edge of life with his brain exposed. Other than being just an amazing fight, this comic also really shows the relationship between these two on a level not really captured anywhere else. Number 7. Ma-Nucci. If you want to talk brutal moments in Marvel Comics, you really need to look no further than the Punisher. Now Ma-Nucci is the head of the Nucci crime family, so yeah, she ain't really a nice lady. Before the moment I'm about to talk about, Frank Castle had thought that he had already neutralized the threat of old Ma here, and that's because he literally fed her to a gaggle of polar bears. Now, while they didn't finish her off, the bears did happen to relieve Ma of her arms and her legs. It was that action that prompted the hiring of the Russian. In the Punisher Volume 5, number 12, after taking down about 80, yes 80 of her thugs, Punisher comes back to finish the job. 80 men were already obliterated, so no one was really willing to lend the legless and armless head of crime a hand as Frank burned down her mansion. She puts up a decent fight with no limbs though, which is kind of impressive. After she attempted to gnaw off his ankles, unsurprisingly unsuccessfully, Frank uses his big old boot plus the muscles in his leg and not so gently flings this helpless, horrible woman into the burning pyre that used to be her home. Number 6. Punisher Netflix prison fight. The Punisher isn't just absolutely ruthless in the comics. When Punisher made his way onto the small screen in Netflix's Daredevil series, he gave us probably one of the most downright savage and ferocious cinematic Marvel moments ever. Taking place in Daredevil Season 2, Episode 9, Frank, played by the irreplaceable Jon Bernthal, found himself in prison alongside the scum that he absolutely despises, and thanks to the Kingpin's influence, he gets locked in a hallway with about 10 inmates, his bare fists, and some very, very rudimentary prison tools. What follows is a solid 2.5 minutes of absolute savagery and brutality as he swiftly ushers each of these inmates to the afterlife, leaving him bruised and battered and covered in the red vino on tap, and ready to face off against a group of officers in riot gear who come in afterwards. Knowing how the main Marvel Cinematic Universe shies away from anything not suitable for a 12-year-old, this scene, and honestly all of the Netflix Marvel shows, stand out as something truly different and exactly what us older fans expected to see from someone as ruthless as the Punisher. Number 5. Punisher vs. Wolverine. Yes, the Punisher is taking up 3 points on this list, and I think it's pretty justified. In the early 2000s, Punisher faced off with Wolverine in Punisher number 16 and 17. Essentially, the Punisher found himself in the crosshairs of Logan, and he needed to buy himself some time without Wolverine getting in his way. To do this, Punisher blows off Wolverine's face with a bit of buckshot in Punisher number 16. Now, thanks to his insane healing factor, Logan is still standing with his face already starting to heal over his exposed adamantium skull. So obviously, that didn't really buy the Punisher much time. So, instead, in Punisher number 17, Frank Castle makes things just a little bit more below the belt, literally, as he wiped Wolverine's gonads off of the playing field in a similar way to how he took off his face. But of course, even this won't stop the mutants, so Frank Castle resorts to even more drastic and kind of creative measures. Needing the means to give himself at least a day or two before Logan will start coming after him again, the Punisher uses a steamroller to slowly but completely flatten Logan, and then he parks it there and walks off to do his business. If anything, I think this is a testament to how powerful Wolverine actually is. Number 4. Alejandra Jones. Alright, buckle up because this one involves Adam. Not me, like the biblical Adam. In Marvel Comics, Adam has devoted himself to one day eradicating sin from mankind at any cost, even human souls. To that end, Adam took in orphaned children and trained them within a Nicaraguan temple to make them perfect hosts for the Ghost Rider. Now, with the Fear Itself event and the arrival of the Serpent, Adam decided that this was a sign to make his move and offered to free Johnny Blaze from the Ghost Rider. Adam awakened the Seeker and had him pick the new Ghost Rider among his students. Alejandra Jones was the one chosen and was immediately sent to battle Scotty, one of the Serpent's avatars. When she came back, Adam demanded that she destroy the sin in the other orphans, leaving them as complete husks. Now, she obviously refused to do that, but in return, Adam made her an unwilling servant. Johnny Blaze, realizing that he made a boo-boo, journeyed to Nicaragua to stop them, but Adam turned Alejandra's power into a massive explosion that encompassed most of the entire country, turning the citizens, all of them, into mindless emotional shells of the individuals that they once were. The only ones unaffected by the blast were Johnny himself and the Seeker. Alejandra was used to destroy the whole of Nicaragua. Number 3. M-Day. So we know that in the House of M's story, Scarlet Witch altered reality in some rather big ways. But it wasn't as if everything before this didn't happen, just no one could remember it. One mutant by the name of Layla Miller, for example, could remember the reality before, and she used her powers to restore the memories of a bunch of other heroes. Another mutant who you might know of by the name of Wolverine could sense that something was wrong with this reality. Now he and a few other heroes, including a resurrected Hawkeye, formed up into a team and put things back to normal. Now seeing as Magneto was now the ruler, it made sense to them that he was the one responsible, and they went on to attack him. During the scuffle, Magneto had his memories returned to him by Layla, and Wanda convinced him it was Quicksilver who urged her to do the whole reality warping thing in the first place. Angrily confronting Quicksilver, who admitted that he would have let Wanda perish, Magneto made him perish. Wanda, who was thoroughly angry and pretty unstable yet again, revived her brother, yelled at her not father, denounced Xavier, and in 3 words, no more mutants, she reverted reality. She depowered 90% of the entire mutant population, resulting in a huge loss of life. All this on the day forever known as M-Day. Number 2. Ultimatum. Ultimatum was supposed to be how the writers finished off the Ultimate Universe stories. Obviously, it didn't really work out that way. Writers kinda just went a little haywire with the things they would do with a dying universe story. Basically, Magneto, who had been a pretty brutal villain in the Ultimate Universe so far, goes even farther during the mega event. Basically, after Magneto gains control of the Hammer of Thor and is manipulated by none other than Dr. Doom, he messes with the magnetic pillars of the world, flipping them on their head and sending weather into a frenzy. The biggest event was a giant tsunami called the Ultimatum Wave that basically put New York underwater, and and brought a giant casualty list. Bruce Banner perishes, but the Hulk ends up living somehow, multiple X-Men pass away, the Wasp gets eaten by the Blob, who in turn gets his head bitten off by Hank Pym, Dormammu turns Doctor Strange into a squished ketchup bottle, and Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch are sent to the afterlife. In a bit more of a divisive move, while the X-Men are looking for their fallen teammates in the wake of the tidal wave in New York, Magneto pays a visit to Professor X and in a pretty brutal scene, snaps the professor's neck. In retaliation, the X-Men attack Magneto's fortress. Angel gets stomped and chomped by Sabretooth, and Magneto eventually rips the adamantium from Wolverine's skeleton and pretty much disintegrates him. And that's just the big stuff. And finally, in at number 1, it's the fall of X. During this year's annual mutant celebration, the Hellfire Gala, literally on the very next page after the new X-Men team is finally announced, out of nowhere, the anti-mutant organization known as Orchis attacks the gala, with Nimrod coming crashing down from the thermosphere at terminal velocity. He completely obliterates Dazzler, Frenzy, Cannonball, and Prodigy, and then punches Jubilee into the ground, wiping out 5 of the 8 new X-Men before he managed to decimate Bobby Drake Iceman, another Omega level mutant. While Juggernaut held off Nimrod, Jean Grey was taken out by Moira X, and Dr. Stasis revealed to Professor X that the medicine that the X-Men had been producing for the world that has led to Krakoa becoming a world power have all been tampered with, and Stasis can now control or wipe out any human who used any of the medicine produced by the X-Men. In exchange for him agreeing to not do that, Charles Xavier agrees to use his power to force the mutant population of Krakoa, some 200,000 strong mutants, to go through teleportation gates to the X-Men's home on Arakko/Mars. Now, Orchis planned on having Arakko being its next target, but instead, something went horribly wrong and 200,000 mutants were suddenly transported to the White Hot Room, essentially the afterlife and the base of operations of the Phoenix Force.